You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Homefield Apparel.
And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As today, your Indiana Hoosiers held serve at home and beat the Minnesota Golden Gophers 73-60 early on a Sunday afternoon in Bloomington to move their record to 12-3 overall and 3-2 in the Big Ten. I'm your host, Andy Bottoms, and I'll be joined momentarily by Jeff Marlowe and Kathy Amos, and we're going to break down the game for you today. The story of the first half was the shooting from IU, where Minnesota was basically daring IU to shoot, and Rob Phinisee in particular was more than obliged to make them pay for it. So he hit 4 threes in the first half, got IU off to a 10-point lead at the break after a bit of a slow start. And then that slow start kind of returned in the second half as water found its level. IU continued to take some of those threes instead of working to get a better shot. And Minnesota eventually took a 49-48 lead. I think a couple leads in that stretch. Their last one was 49-48, but IU executed well on both ends of the floor late in the game and pulled away to win the game by 13. So it gives IU another Big Ten win and an interesting game just in terms of the way each half played out. Really balanced scoring from IU with 5 guys in double figures, I believe. And so we'll talk about all that. A lot of good performances from guys up and down the roster tonight. So we'll break that down for you here on the show. But let's start this show the way we start every show, and that is with our banner moment. There were a lot of places to go here, so I'm going to give a couple that stood out. One of which was with that 49-48 lead for Minnesota. Trey Galloway took a 3 from the wing. Jordan Geronimo made just a really good effort play to keep the ball alive and eventually get an offensive rebound that was kicked back to Miller Kopp, who nailed a 3 at the top of the key. And IU never trailed from that point forward. They went up 51-49 and led the rest of the way and expanded that lead. And the other, I guess, was a series of moments. There was a stretch somewhat late in the second half, kind of the middle to late point in the second half. IU made a more concerted effort to get the ball to Race Thompson inside. I think probably a couple of reasons for that. One, to put a little bit of defensive pressure on Battle of Minnesota, who was really strong offensively, but I think they really wanted to test him on the defensive end. And two, this is a game that Race said was really important to him, being from Minnesota. It's one that he really wanted, and I thought it was great that he was put in a position to really deliver some key buckets for IU and did so down the stretch. I think during one stretch he scored on maybe 3 of 5 possessions, if I'm looking at this correctly, and a couple nice post-ups where he was able to get some key baskets to extend that lead late. So a great win for the team, a great win for Race in a game that meant a lot to him, and he was certainly a key factor in it, particularly in the second half. All right, with that, our banner moment today, as always, is brought to you by our friends over at Homefield Apparel, who are now in their 5th season of sponsoring the Assembly Call, and their first as a presenting sponsor for the Back Home Network. As you surely know by now, Homefield has the largest collection of vintage IU apparel that you'll find anywhere, with beloved logos like 2 different versions of the Bison. And if you support other college teams or have people in your life who do, Homefield probably has something for them as well, like their Montana or Montana State collections that they released on Saturday. Their product line now extends to more than 120 different schools with unique vintage logos for all of them. And no matter what you buy, it will be comfortable and the colors will last through many washings. Plus, you're supporting an Indiana-based company that came up through Kelly. What could be better than that? So go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code HOME to get 15% off your entire first order. Again, that's promo code HOME for 15% off. Once again, that website is homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. All right, now it's time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team, which today I'm happy to be joined by the 2 hosts of Doing the Work, the IU Women's podcast post-game show that has spun up recently, Kathy Amos and Jeff Marlowe. So, Kathy, I will throw it to you first. Overall thoughts on today's game?
Yeah, I think the 2 overall thoughts I had in particular were big picture for us. I think it was good just to get these back-to-back wins, right? I was a little concerned coming off the Ohio State win from the other night that maybe we'd have somewhat of a letdown coming into this game. It wasn't exactly our prettiest game. I think for sure Ohio State was a little bit prettier for me, but a win's a win, and 13-point win no less is really great. So I'd love to see that we followed up that win with another win and continuing to defend our home court here. And then overall, just from the micro level, looking at the game in particular, I love the balance, right? We had 5 guys in double figures today. With that, and I know we'll get into the numbers more, but we had 17 assists as well. So we really, I thought, sharing the ball and moving it around. So to me, I like seeing that again, macro level, following it up, and it's another step forward for our program as a whole. And then in the micro, I just love the balanced scoring that we had from people, not even just all our starters. So for me, those are the 2 big themes that I saw today that I loved seeing.
Absolutely. Coach Marlowe, what about your opening thoughts on today's 73-60 victory?
Yeah, I guess kind of I was happy to see the middle toughness. And I know we've had a little bit of question with this group, but once Minnesota got that lead at 47-46, I was kind of, my back of my head, I was like, oh no, this may not be good, because all the momentum was kind of rolling with them. They'd been on a 16-5, 18-5 type run. And I thought the kids showed, some good mental toughness. They were able to get a key play. I thought, Andy, you stole kind of my meaningful moment with the banner moment, because I had that circled, that 3 by Miller off of the play where Jordan Geronimo had kept it alive, that gave us the lead, and we never trailed again. And I thought that's when the defense again in the second half kind of locked in a little better. And then, as Kathy kind of said, micro, looking at a little bit of kind of previous stats, nobody except Trace played more than 30 minutes. And I think that's an even bigger thing, that we can come out with a 13-point win and we can spread the minutes a little bit more, so we're not maybe overloading guys with 35 and 36 minutes every night. But I will also kind of go back to a Bob Knightism here. Last game, next game. It was important to get this win because we won the last game. Now we got to be able to take it on the road and go to Iowa on Thursday and have it travel.
Yep, I would certainly agree with that, is just being able to stack some of these wins. I think that helps overcome maybe some of those mental hurdles that you talked about there. So as we kind of look back through the game, a few key storylines. I think the first has to be the play of Rob Phinisee, particularly in the first half, although I thought he played really well on the defensive end throughout the game. I know Coach was there and was texting just about, being able to see the confidence in him and how well he was playing. But, as I mentioned in the opening, Minnesota's game plan, particularly in the first half, was very much sag off of everybody, make it really hard to get the ball into TJD, double him when he got it, and force other guys to beat him. And for a little bit at the beginning, I think X fell into, getting baited into taking some of those shots. But Rob came in, stepped in pretty much immediately. I think he missed one on the first possession that he was in the game, but there was no hesitation, for better or worse. If you thought they were good shots or bad shots, I don't know, but he did not hesitate. I mean, he took threes on the first 3 possessions that he was in the game as I look back through it, but he really settled in, made some big ones. Was 4 of 7, 4 of 8, I think, in the first half from 3. Didn't score. I think the only point he had in the second half was a free throw toward the end of the game. Didn't shoot nearly as much, but he ends with 13 points, 4 assists, 3 rebounds, 2 steals, a block where he came from the weak side toward the end of the first half and did his best TJD impersonation, and no turnovers. And again, we can talk whatever we want about plus minus, but he was plus 22 for the game in 29 minutes. And I just think probably the best place to start is Rob and the way that he responded to those opportunities. But more than that, just the confidence to really step up and not hesitate to take those shots, even when the first one didn't go in. So, Kathy, I'll throw it to you first. Thoughts on Rob's performance? Any plays in particular that stood out to you with him, or just general thoughts on his play?
Yeah, I loved Rob today. I mean, yes, he was 4 for 8. Again, point wise, not the production in the second half, but that wasn't the scoring's not the whole thing to basketball, right? So yes, his defense I thought was really spot on from start to finish. The play for me that I wrote down for Rob was actually at 12:20. In that first half when he knocked down that first 3, and it really just sparked, actually, I thought, a run that ended up, I think we went on, a big run there and got our first lead right after that. So we ended up going up 19-17. And that was his first thing. And I wrote down, is this, finally Rob's confidence coming back, and will we see that? And I felt we saw that, especially in the first half. He definitely wasn't shy. maybe questionable on some of the shots going up, maybe a little too quick. But you could say that from the rest of the team, I think, as well, where maybe a couple more passes going inside. And I think they corrected some of that a little bit in the second half. But overall, back to Rob, yes, I thought he played well within himself. No turnovers. The block. I loved watching Rob today. This is the Rob I think we're hoping to see again. Now the question comes to Rob: are we going to be consistent with him and see this again in the next game? But it's a good start, and I love the confidence from him.
Yeah, before I throw it to you, Coach Mello, I thought one of the things with Rob, maybe different than some other guys in the second half, he only took 2 shots. One was a drive where he, I think, kind of drove to get fouled more than he drove to make the shot, and then there was another 3 that he took where he was open. But I thought and I think that's the kind of maturity you'd expect from a senior in that scenario, but didn't really come out saying, hey, I hit 4 threes in the first half, I'm going to go jack up a whole bunch in the second half. I thought really kind of stuck to what they wanted to do from a game plan perspective and didn't force shots that weren't there. So, Coach, I'll let you tack onto that however you want, but I thought that was a, interesting point you made, Kathy, just in terms of him not scoring a lot in the second half. Didn't mean that he didn't play well. And I think he, among everybody, really just continued to play within himself and didn't fall in love with the 3 as much as some guys did. And he was actually the guy who hit more of them in the first half and still didn't do it. So we'll go from there. But Coach, thoughts on Rob's play today?
Well, I think this is the Rob Phinisee that we've been waiting for. I'm going to mix 2 players together here. I think this is the Rob Phinisee we've all been waiting for. The kid that can come in off the bench and give us some positive minutes. And we know defensively, Rob is going to be a one of our best defenders when he comes on the floor. And when he can come out and just get us 2, 3 baskets, let alone 4 3-pointers in the first half, I think that's the Rob we've all been waiting for. I think they showed the stat at this point. He was only averaging about 4 points a game, and he comes out and gets us 13. And if Rob can do that, it really will make it difficult to double the post. And I tweeted out during the game that early in the first half, I thought that TJD was willing to be a facilitator, and that benefited Rob especially, and X to a certain degree, to Xavier to a certain degree. I'm a little bit. I'm not too. I don't get quite as worked up about maybe some of the quicker threes as some of the fan base does. I love a good 3, but. I thought in the second half they did get away. They got maybe just a tad too quick, just because it was maybe it wasn't in transition. A lot of them were just kind of one pass and a shot. But to Rob's point, kind of back to you, Andy, he didn't force anything in the second half. Like you said, I think that drive was more to try and draw a foul. I would like to see him finish it, obviously, but he really wasn't looking to score much. You could kind of see he was being a leader. I caught a couple of times where he was getting the instructions from Coach Woodson, and he was relaying the message to the kids on the floor. Hey, let's just settle down a little bit. Let's run something here. And so I thought they had that lull there in the second half that allowed Minnesota to get back in the game. I'd like to see them clean that up. But overall, I thought Rob played a really good game, as Kathy pointed out, as you pointed out. It doesn't always show up in the scoring column. We talked about this a little bit with the women's team. Alexa Golbe is exactly like this. It doesn't always show up in the scoring column. And that's the kind of thing if Rob can give us off the bench, because we won the bench battle today, and I thought that was huge.
Yeah, so let's talk about, the 2 other things I wanted to hit on, kind of as key storylines. I think one you alluded to, so we'll go to that one next. It was just the lull kind of to start the second half. They had really built up that lead, get it up to 10 at the break, go right into TJD out of halftime. He scores, it's 12. And then IU had a series of just kind of settling for shots or, turnovers there. Miller missed a 3. X had a turnover. Race took a 3 and missed it. X had a wild drive for the basket. X takes a 3 and misses it. They did have the nice Stewart one in transition, but then, TJD turns it over. And that really kind of let Minnesota get back in the game. And it felt like another game where X came out of the locker room and just tried to do too much, and got a little bit upset about a foul call or 2 in there. Some of the calls on him I did think were kind of ticky-tack, but I think at some point his reputation is preceding him a little bit, and I'm not sure that's going to change. So so I thought that led to that stretch, and then IU really struggled defensively from there. Had ball screen issues similar to what we saw against Penn State, where some miscommunication, guys getting straight line drives to the basket. I give Minnesota some credit where they were basically putting Battle and Willis in those pick and rolls and given how Battle was shooting, you had to be aware of him being able to pop out, but IU also couldn't really keep dribblers in front of him, and really kind of struggled defensively in that stretch that let them get back in the game. So, Coach Marlowe, I'll throw this one to you first. I mean, what do you think was the biggest issue or issues during that stretch that took what once was a 12-point lead and turned it into a 1-point deficit?
A combination of things, like you mentioned, Andy. I kind of had made some of those same notes. A couple quick shots, a couple bad turnovers, but I was a little more concerned, kind of at your last point, was with the defense on the. We were just letting Minnesota get to the rim. There was very little rim protection once they got into the lane. But I was also concerned. The one I really saw, Andy, was they were starting to put TJD in the pick and roll, and they were switching off, and TJD really wasn't stepping up on the screen. He was kind of laying back on the screen, and that was allowing, I think it was Willis especially, to turn the corner. And then he was trying to get the block at the end at the rim. Well, a really good offensive player knows how to get a shot over a shot blocker, and you got to be a little more up on Willis. And I thought that was a great play, by a great sequence there by Minnesota to kind of figure that, hey, we're just going to put him in this and see if they can guard it. I would have liked to see us maybe switch that in terms of who was that Trace was guarding, see if maybe we could bring him back toward a baseline and let him come and help a little bit more rather than having to guard the ball screen. But I thought they got that solved a little bit later in the half. During that stretch, they weren't very good with it, but I thought they got it solved a little bit better. And there were a couple of key plays that Miller Kopp made a play that I think kind of goes unrecognized. Minnesota was still in the game. I believe it might have been 57, 54, 59, 54. And Miller cut off a baseline drive, I believe, by Battle, and forced it out to a jump shot that was a really tough contested jump shot, missed it. We got the rebound, and I think we took it either to 5 or 7 from there. To me, that was a key play, because we hadn't gotten a lot of help in the second half that had been there timely, and Miller got there.
Yeah, Kathy, what were your thoughts on that stretch, whether that be, the defense, the decision-making on the offensive end, or things like that, and maybe the fact that it's kind of becoming a theme with the team that they come out a little bit sluggish, it feels like, to start these second halves.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the players I was really watching on defense a bit today to see was Parker Stewart. And I thought there were a couple of times in the second half where I was really noticing him getting beat off of the drive. And I think that was part of what Coach was alluding to here as well with TJD, and then not getting much help. And then there was one time I very much saw Stewart slack off of somebody who had the ball shooting to go back and cover his guy. And I'm not a big fan of leaving the ball. Luckily the shot didn't go in for Minnesota in that case, but I wasn't overly thrilled with Parker Stewart's defense on a couple of occasions today. So I think that was part of it in that stretch as well for me. I do want to go back to something, Andy, though, that you were talking about with X, and I agree. I think some of the calls, and I think you're right, his reputation is definitely preceding him with some of the calls. However, I thought today he responded much better than we've seen in the past, and really still played within himself and didn't take those calls and then lead it down into poor offensive play, maybe pressing or even pressing again on the defensive end. And I thought he played really well in himself today. And I liked what I saw for the most part from X. There were a couple of times I think for sure he's still trying to do a little too much and maybe some decision making, but compared to how we saw him at the beginning of the year, I think we're starting to see some pretty good growth from Xavier.
Go ahead. I was going to say, I wanted to piggyback off of Kathy's comment there. I can't remember if it was the second or the third foul he got in the second half, but he was starting to plead his case. And if you saw Mike Woodson basically yelled at him, kind of called him over and said, hey, no, we need to stay focused. And I thought that was a great coaching move.
Yeah, that was his third foul. So I noticed that too, Jeff, and you could see X, or you could see it on Coach Woodson's face. He's like, X, come on over, and you could see. And then after that, he's like, okay, got it. So I
think the very next play after that's when he made that nice reverse where he kind of made the guy think he was pulling it back out and then turned there. Yeah, I thought there was I think both he and the coaching staff are learning how to deal with him, I guess, for lack of a better term, right? Like he got those 2 fouls pretty early in the second half, and they took him out after the second one where he fouled the jump shooter. Again, I thought that was a little bit ticky-tack compared to some of the other stuff. But I thought they took him out to kind of calm him down in that scenario versus the one that you guys just brought up, which I had noted as well, where it was just kind of like within the game, settling him down, and then he responded by making a big play as opposed to really letting things snowball. But I think they also saw it wasn't just the fouls at the beginning of the half. It was some of the shots. It was some of the decision-making and whatever. So, I think they're doing a good job with that. And Kathy, what you brought up with Parker, I think that's makes some of what Phinisee's been able to do all the more important. He's been the guy when Parker's been in foul trouble that's subbed in for him. And really, his defense late in the Ohio State game was key for I think Branham it was who was really giving Stewart some fits. And when he ended up getting taken out with those fouls, Rob did a good job on him the rest of the game. I think Rob, there's probably some arguments you made. There were guys that talked about him in the past, talking about some of the nagging injuries, and it seems like maybe the Christmas break or whatever has like got him back with some of that spring in his step. But I went back and found the text from coach, but he is watching him up close defensively is awesome. His hands, his stance, his quickness. He said you can just see the confidence in his eyes on a different thing. So not to circle back to that too much, but and then the other thing was, we've not talked about TJD. I thought it was a little bit of a kind of let the game come to him, as we talked about. Didn't really, only took a couple shots in the first half, ended up with 4 points for the game, ended up with 13 and 12. Thought struggled at times defensively when they were putting him in some of those ball screen scenarios. But overall, he and Race were really key in the second half as the balance of where IU scoring came from shifted from the backcourt to the front court. Those guys had 17 of the 34 as they, really, and were 7 of 10 from the floor and got to the free throw line 4 times. So I thought, whereas the first half was kind of guard dominant because of the way they played, Race and Trace, who have been kind of the bread and butter for the team for most of the year, really reasserted themselves despite the way that Minnesota was playing. And I do think the way that IU hit shots in the first half had a little bit to do with that and freed up a bit more space for them. But Kathy, I'll throw this to you first. Just, kind of thoughts on the impact of Race and Trace, particularly in the second half and down the stretch.
Yeah, actually, that was one of the meaningful moments I wrote down. There was about 7 minutes left to go. And as you had pointed out already, Andy, they were really starting to target Race a lot more. And you could see that even with Trace, about 7 minutes left to go. Trace had the ball. And then he passed it to X, who then passed it on to Race. And so while Trace didn't get the normal assist, I guess you can call it a hockey assist in that case. And that was part of our 10-0 run that we were going on under there to go up 54-65 at that point. I thought that was a great example again of how Trace today in total was not trying to force it. He was playing within what Minnesota gave him. As you mentioned, he only had 4 points in the first half, but I didn't think it was a bad first half. And I don't think it was a bad game from Trace at all. Obviously he ended up with his, I think 28th or so overall double for his career. So he had a nice game, and it was a quiet game, but he took what Minnesota gave him, even though you may not see it with only 2 assists. I thought he was very involved and had some really nice passes today. And yeah, Race, as you mentioned, this was a game that was very personal for him, being from Minnesota. But again, he didn't take that emotion and it to a place where he didn't play within himself. And just a good game from Race overall as well. Ending up with another one of our double-digit scorers with 10 points, as well as I think he had quite a few rebounds as well, didn't he? Oh, only 5. Okay, well, it felt like a lot more.
He had fewer than I thought, although he came up with a couple late. Coach, before I give you your thoughts on, or get your thoughts on Race, just one thing to kind of throw out, and maybe you can incorporate this if you want. I think Battle is kind of a tough cover for really either TJD or Race, and then Race spent the majority of the time on him. And I thought he did overall a pretty good job. I mean, Battle hit some tough shots. There was a few that he got open looks, and I know Geronimo kind of overhelped on the one he banked in, and we can argue that one, our thoughts on that shot in general. But I thought Race did a pretty good job for a guy who's difficult to guard in that scenario. So I think you also factor that in a little bit to his performance. But overall thoughts on the IU bigs from you?
I want to agree with Kathy about TJD. And again, I kind of mentioned this earlier. I tweeted out during the game that he played within himself today, except for the one pass he threw to about the 6th row. That was, other than that, I thought Trace really allowed everything to come to him, and he didn't force a lot. And we've seen games like that from Trace where he tries to force stuff. We feeling like he has to make something happen. And today there seemed to be, obviously it helps when guys are hitting shots, but he was trusting the teammates when he kicked it out. and that they would hit shots. And I thought that was an interesting way that Minnesota was trying to double him by coming off the point guard, and not really even a true double, more of just a constant dig, kind of trying to sit down in there and see if they could just get him to pass it out. As far as Race, I thought it was an interesting matchup with Battle, because Race kind of talked about this in the availability yesterday, that he sees this as a rivalry game. It's a big game for him, as Kathy said, but also he and Battle, no pun intended, had battled it out in high school. They've known each other for quite a bit of time up in Minnesota, and so it makes me wonder if Coach Woodson or maybe Race had a conversation, or one went to the other and was like, hey, let me have a crack at him, or what do you think about taking a crack at him? And just kind of a personal battle. And and again, no pun intended here, but I think Battle got his 19, but he was 3 for 10 from deep, and he was 7 of 17 overall. I think Race gets probably an A- B+ for his effort, because it is a tough matchup, but I thought he did well on Battle.
Yeah, I mean, he's had a heck of a week defensively between EJ Liddell and and Battle, and has emerged well. I know TJD spent some time on Liddell as well, but yeah, tough. Although I think every game is a tough cover for front court. So in the Big Ten at least. So we'll see who's yeah. And then you got Keegan Murray coming up next. So yeah, it just keeps getting easier or something like that.
Fun.
But we'll talk Iowa in a minute. We've got our resident Iowan on to discuss it. So we'll make sure we do that, because we won't have another show before that game. So we'll hit a quick preview as we go into that. So, but for now, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, as we continue our breakdown of IU's 73-60 win over Minnesota, we'll point out the meaningful moment that you might have missed, and then go inside the numbers to highlight the most important statistical notes from the game. You're listening to the Assembly Call. Stick with us.
Hi, this is Jawan Morgan. What's the only thing better than getting IU's first triple-double in 47 years? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the Assembly Call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
And welcome back. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Kathy Amos and Jeff Marlowe, and we are breaking down IU's 73-60 home win over Minnesota, which moves the Hoosiers to 3-2 in Big Ten play. And it is time for
meaningful moments that you might have missed.
I fear to a certain extent that I used many of the meaningful moments that I had earmarked earlier in the first segment of the show, but I think I have one other one. Some of the ones I had were the Cop 3-pointer, X responding to that foul and playing well. Another one I'll throw out there though, this was toward the end of the first half, and this kind of shows you the importance of being able to step out and make some of these shots and what it forces a defense to do. Because for as much as Minnesota had been drilled into sag off, make them make threes, after IU had hit a few, this was, I think, the next to last possession of the half, and X had just made one. I think the previous 3 possessions, Rob made one, Rob made another one, and then X made one. So they kick it out to X, and he does a shot fake. The guy comes closing out hard at him. He gets into the lane, draws 2 fouls, and makes them both. And I think that, I guess if there was, you didn't shoot it as well from the 3-point line in the second half as they did in the first. I think doing it so well in the first half really did open up some things, because Minnesota had to start closing out based on the way IU was hitting shots. So I thought that was a good example of X being able to take advantage of that in some of those scenarios. But Kathy, any other you're a copious note taker, so I know that even though I used up most of the meaningful moments that I had flagged, you probably have a reserve that we can dip into here. So I'll throw it to you first.
I do. And yes, for proof, yes, I have a whole sheet of notes that I take during games that I'm hosting pods on. Yeah, we have used quite a few of them, but I have one other one I wanted to talk about really, and it was our bench play. And about 10 minutes in the first half, we had all 5 subs on the floor. And I noted at the time we were 19-19 at that point. And we didn't sub anybody else in until the 5:55 mark. So well over 4 minutes of game time play. And those subs I thought actually did a pretty decent job. We ended up then going down by 25-24. So they really only gave up 1 point in terms of net in that time. So not a lot of scoring. I think both sides of the ball were really stagnant during those 5 minutes or so. But I thought the bench actually played pretty well in that streak, especially with no other starters. And we've talked about this on the show before and in the chat and our private community about how Coach Woodson really likes to get 5 subs all together at one time. And do we think that's the right thing or not the right thing? What we think probably doesn't matter a whole lot, to be honest. But in this case, I think it turned out fairly well. And then he brought in TJD and Race pretty soon after that. But I thought that stretch for the bench actually was pretty decent.
Yeah, I noted that I took the same notes and had the same scores written down as you did. So good to check my work at least. But I thought Michael Durr played well again, stepped in, hit that elbow jumper. I think he's a guy who we can continue to see more of because I think he does bring some skills to the table. I think that group struggles in games like today or like Penn State that aren't played at as quick of a pace because I think it really brings out the focus on kind of the lack of offense and with that group and puts a little bit more pressure on executing in the half court where sometimes they do well, sometimes they struggle. Scoop, they ran a nice play for him. One of the first plays that he was in and rimmed out a 3. So yeah, it was a mixed bag for me during that stretch, but I think the net effect of it was fine in the sense that it went from a tie game to a 1-point deficit. But I did kind of watch that as well. And I thought Galloway, played better in the second half, made a couple nice plays and had a runner believe that he was able to convert in that scenario. So I thought he did well, wasn't quite as impactful, but I think to a certain extent the pace of the game had a lot to do with it. Coach Marlowe, any meaningful moments that you had that we didn't get to yet?
Well, I'll kind of piggyback off of yours to begin with Michael Durr's jump shot. That was the one, I think maybe the one or a handful of possessions where Minnesota tried to go zone, and we recognized it and we were pretty patient, and we flashed Michael Durr into that mid to high post, and he knocked down that shot. I thought it was a good job of the kids of recognizing what was going on the floor. And back to the lineup there, I know they played to basically a -1 there, but I just felt that group really kind of got stagnant. It didn't really get a lot of ball movement, but by keeping it close, it allowed you to get some key rest. And we brought Trace and Race back in. It was really the under 8 timeout, but it ended up not being until like under 6 minutes. There were some long stretches, especially in that first half, with very few whistles. And so I thought that was an important point. And then also I had a meaningful moment, and maybe it's for me, I really noticed in the first half, especially, our baseline out of bounds play seemed to be running with Parker Stewart as the first option because we scored with him twice in the first half off of nice out of bounds plays where we got him one kind of a little lob play at the rim. And then another one, we ran him across the floor, kind of got him to the weak side and threw it across and got him a jump shot from about 13 feet. So I thought that was interesting because I think that tells me a little bit that Mike Woodson is, with Parker's on the floor, he's thinking Parker Stewart as the first option, maybe, or at least option 1B on his baseline out of bounds. And that's a way to get Parker Stewart some more shots out of some sets that we've all been kind of clamoring for here in the community and in the post-game chat mobs.
I thought the one where he got the baseline jumper, I think they ran something really similar to Ohio State, and he got about the same shot and just rimmed it out there. But yeah, a good way to get him involved for sure. The only other general point I'll make, and this isn't necessarily a particular moment, but I do think as we talk about, and this maybe is a good segue into the numbers, the way that IU's bench played and just the minutes they were able to give was a huge difference because Minnesota is not deep. They did not play a lot of guys. And I thought late in both halves, they really started to look tired, particularly in the first half when IU really busted out that lead. They were short on a ton of shots and just had to play a lot of minutes, even though the game wasn't necessarily played at a fast pace. But I thought just being able to get those minutes and have guys on the bench make, in some cases, large contributions was a gigantic difference between what we saw from IU and what we saw from Minnesota. And I think to a certain extent, it just is I continue to be a little bit frustrated by, maybe a lot bit frustrated by the playing the 5 subs at the same time. But the talent is there on the bench to really be able to mix and match with some of the starters to really provide the lift that you saw today and be a difference maker in games. I just get the feeling that Woodson's still figuring out how best to try to use them. But maybe we'll be sitting here in game 30 and run the same thing, at which point I'll probably not be just, screaming into the void, hoping that something is going to change at that point. But, but I do think that was a huge difference. I mean, like I said, we'll use that to segue into the numbers. And when you look at bench points, IU ends up with 21 and Minnesota has just 7. And that was one of the big differences in the game. So as we go inside the numbers, reminder, this segment is sponsored by the Power Rank, where our friend Ed uses data and analytics to make accurate football and college basketball predictions. Also writes an incredible March Madness guide every year, which will have a special offer for you on once March Madness rolls around. And for now, if you want sports betting advice with a PhD edge, or you just like understanding sports at a more analytical level, you should subscribe to Ed's free newsletter. Go to thepowerrank.com/AC to subscribe. That's thepowerrank.com/AC. All right, well, let's dissect the numbers that tell the story of the game. And Kathy, what were some numbers that stood out to you as you looked over the box score?
Yeah, I mean, we've already talked about 3-point shooting, so I'm not going to talk about that anymore, but I am going to go the opposite way and talk about points in the paint. We actually tied Minnesota 30-30, and if I would have seen that stat on its own before the game, I would have thought we would have lost or have been a lot closer. So that's really actually quite nice to see that we're starting to find anyway. Again, we'll see if this is a trend or if this continues, because we know the last game we didn't have much outside scoring. This time we didn't even have half our scoring coming from in the paint. So I thought that was good to see that the team found a way to win today. Of course, a lot of that came with knocking down threes, which we've been hoping and asking for years now. So it's really good to see that we had a different way of winning offensively today. So that was one number in particular that jumped out for me.
Coach Marlowe, what about you?
I'm going to start with about the threes, just the fact that we shot 24 of them. I think that was a good number. I think there have been times we've talked about in the postgame show with the different hosts that we probably want to shoot a few more than the 15 or 16 at times we've gotten, and 9 for 24 puts us at 38%, 37.5 officially. So I think if we shoot that, I think that's going to be a good night. I'm not sure we're going to shoot 7 for 14 like we did in the first half every game, but that I like the attitude that the kids had for taking what they were being given on the three. The other stat I'll go to is on the defensive side. We held them to 38% overall, 20% on threes. And again, you just really see that right now, the identity of this team is something that, I really was kind of adamant about in the past was what was our identity? We may still not exactly be a good offensive team, but we have a defensive identity. And as I mentioned earlier, you want to be able to travel and win games on the road. Defense can travel. And so we just got to make sure we stay as locked in, as connected as we can. But it's obvious that Mike Woodson has decided, at least this first year, this is going to be known as a defensive team. And I think, again, that showed. We held another Big Ten team to 60 points. I mean, that just, that's a great number in the league.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, you look, Minnesota was 5 of 25 from 3, about the same both halves. I think 2 of 13 in the first, 3 of 12 in the second. Did do fairly well on twos, though. If my quick math says they're 18 of 35, so just a little bit over 50%, which is an area that IU had really excelled in. Then, most of that came when IU was really struggling to keep guys in front of them. Although some of those came from some mid-range jumpers that were tough. It felt a little bit. Deja vu to Penn State a little when some of these shots started falling in that Minnesota threw in early in the game. But I think the big one that stands out to me that we haven't talked about yet is the assist numbers. I know a couple of folks pointed that out in the chat. I think 11 assists on 15 makes in the first half, 17 assists on 27 makes overall for the game, compared to just 6 turnovers. Galloway was the only guy that had more than 1 turnover, interestingly enough. And I just thought some of that was based on the way that Minnesota played, but also just being able and willing to pass the ball along to somebody to get, to get a good shot, to get a better shot. and then guys obviously being able to knock those down as we went. So I think that was a big one. Rebounding wise, I was looking at that before the game. The games that Minnesota had lost previously, they had just gotten absolutely murdered on the glass by Illinois and Michigan State. And IU didn't necessarily do that today. They did out-rebound them. It's like 39-34 based on what I'm seeing here. They each had the same number of offensive rebounds. I know they noted on the broadcast Minnesota does not really go to the offensive glass, but I think they had 4 team offensive rebounds, all of which I think were blocks that, went off of, that IU had blocked. And so those count as team offensive rebound. So I don't know that it was really a function of them, crashing the glass or things like that. But I thought that was there. Minnesota did not turn the ball over much either, just 5. And that's pretty much been their MO all year. So that was not particularly surprising, but IU did make a lot out of the offensive rebounds they got. They got 7 offensive rebounds and turned them into 13 points as opposed to just 3 for Minnesota. So I thought some of those, kind of hustle plays were important. And then if you look at, obviously not a lot of steals in the game where you don't turn people over. 4 blocks in the game. TJD actually did not have any. It was an interesting set of guys who got blocks. You had Xavier Johnson, Rob Phinisee, Tamar Bates, and Trey Galloway. Just the shot blockers you would expect from this IU team. So, anyway, any thoughts on any of those stats that jumped out to you guys, or others that you wanted to hit on? Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, I just, not those ones that you just mentioned. One I wanted to talk about a little bit was free throws. We weren't particularly great from free throw line, or we were 66%, I think. What I wanted to talk about with free throws is the fact that we didn't have any until 1 minute left in the first half. And that was when X went to the line when he finally got fouled. I thought it was indicative of how it didn't seem we were driving the ball a whole lot, especially in the first half. We ended up with 15 total. But I thought maybe free throws or something that we could have been a little more indicative of showing. I thought we could have been more aggressive in that first half. I know the refs overall didn't call a lot of fouls, but I don't think Minnesota was specifically very aggressive either. So it wasn't like I thought the refs just weren't calling fouls that were there. I just felt neither team was really driving it, especially us.
Yeah, that's a great point. Even the 13 they got, I think 6 of those were late when when Minnesota was fouling. So, just for the game, that's something Minnesota had not done a lot coming into the season, is putting people on the line, whether that's because they're not close enough defense, they're not playing good enough defense to foul people, or they're just coached that well not to foul. But yeah, it was pretty interesting for as much as IU's been getting to the line to hardly get there at all in the first half. But percentage wise, not terrible, but I agree with you. I think some of the taking those threes and settling for that, the trade-off is you're not really getting to the line, putting a lot of pressure on the defense in that regard. Coach Marlowe, any other numbers for you?
Well, I kind of go with what Kathy was talking about, but like you mentioned, there really weren't a lot of free throws for a Big Ten game. 2 teams combined for 27 free throws. Man, there's Big Ten games where they shoot that in the first half, it seems like. So maybe neither team is being aggressive. I thought to a certain degree the officials let them play, and then kind of typical Big Ten type stuff, they'll call some ticky-tack stuff and make it look like they're calling something. The numbers that jump out to me, and Andy, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, so I did the math real quick. Finished the first half basically from the time it was 16-11 on a 28-13 run. From the time that we were trailing 47-46, which I believe was Minnesota's only lead in the second half, we finished the game on a 24-13 run. So finishing the halves was definitely a positive today, and I thought that was those were meaningful numbers.
Yeah, the only other thing I just want to talk about, and I don't know if we call the stat or if just in general, our guard play in the first half I thought was great. And I guess the stat to back that up is their points. So Rob had 12 and X had 10 points in the first half. So they had a combined 22 points of our 39 in that first half. And they really, again, overall, I thought the team took what Minnesota was giving us and they were actually making those shots. So I enjoyed the guard play that we had in that first half.
Yeah, I agree. Kind of funny. We talked about how much, Trace and Ray scored about half the second half points, and those guys scored more than half of the first half points. So definitely a tale of 2 halves, but I guess that's how you end up with 5 guys in double figures when it's a more of a perimeter game one half and more of an inside game on the next. I don't know.
Yeah. Took what Minnesota gave us in both halves.
Exactly. All right. Well, we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we'll hand out our game balls and the Hoosier Hustle Award. And then we'll talk about what lingering questions we have before we take a quick look ahead to IU's next opponent. That's all next here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us.
This is Jordan Holmes, and I never miss a shot or an episode of the Assembly Call.
Thank you, Jordan, and welcome back. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. You can catch us live immediately following every IU basketball game, plus every Thursday night at our website, assemblycall.com. Also, make sure you sign up for our free IU Hoops email newsletter. Over 9,000 of your fellow IU fans have already subscribed, and you can join for free today at join.assemblycall.com. Again, that's join.assemblycall.com. I'm Andy Bottoms here with the hosts of Doing the Work, Kathy Amos and Jeff Marlowe, and we are breaking down IU's 73-60 victory over Minnesota. And now it's time for our game balls in a game where 5 guys are in double figures. This might be a little bit more trouble to hand out than most. So, Kathy, I'll give you first crack. Who gets your game ball today?
Geez, thanks. Okay. Yeah.
It's believe me, it's better to go first than last, because when you go last, if somebody else says the same thing, then you got to break the tie. So,
Yeah.
while you're being put on the spot, you're at least being spared the having to break the tie later.
Fair. Okay. You know what? I'm going to go with Rob Phinisee for this. I think we've been so down on Rob here with his confidence and not playing offensively at a high level. And today I thought he really got his swagger back in that first half in particular, with 4 of 8 3-point shooting. I believe those 4 3-pointers tied his career high for 3-pointers made. And again, following that up in the second half, he didn't, again, force it and take bad shots. He ended up with only 1 point in the second half on a free throw. However, he was spot on defensively, which is what we needed. Again, as you mentioned, Andy, we went more inside in that second half anyway, and we weren't trying to force it. So I'm giving my game ball to Rob.
All right. Coach Marlowe, you going along with Rob, or are you going a different direction?
No, I'm going to go with Rob. I thought, especially again, we fell a little bit behind the first half. It wasn't necessarily a terrible start in the first half. Just Minnesota hit some tough fadeaway type shots. But I thought Rob gave us a lift off the bench. We've already talked about his stats, his overall. But for me, and I know, again, I kind of like it more than some of the others on here, but he was plus 22 for the game. And just along with that to me was a big difference. If I was kind of looking at a couple others as well, but Rob being plus 22, I'm going to go with Rob.
All right. Well, you guys made it easy on me, although that's who I would have gone with as well. So we'll make it unanimous. I think the second game in a row, you've really seen somebody come off the bench and kind of change the direction of the game. We saw that with Trey in the Ohio State game. And I think Rob really kind of righted the ship for IU and helped them get going. And then really with Stewart having a little bit of trouble defensively, getting in a bit of foul trouble. X went out early in the second half when he was getting a little bit flustered. Rob was a guy they called on in those scenarios, and he really responded defensively and did a good job keeping guys in front of him in a game when IU as a whole struggled to do that. I thought he was really, really strong on both ends. So unanimous, Rob Phinisee, and I believe that's his first game ball. All right, so now it's time for the Hoosier Hustle Award, which is sponsored by our friends over at Evansville Security Services, based in the hometown of IU legend Calvert Chaney and hopefully future legend Christian Lander, who missed the game today with the leg injury. Evansville Security Services provides off-duty police officers to businesses and individuals throughout Indiana. Remember, prevention cannot be measured, so let Evansville Security Services help you prevent a bad outcome today. Go to evansvillesecurityservices.com to learn more. That's evansvillesecurityservices.com. So I believe, although maybe just because he hasn't put it on here, that this is, I don't know where the Move the Noodle Award, falls in general. So we're going to stick with the Hoosier Hustle Award for now, and perhaps put it in that same vein. But I'm just working with what I've got here, so we'll go with that one. All right, Coach Marlowe, I'll let you go first with this one. Again, I think probably a lot of candidates for the Hoosier Hustle Award in this one as well. So who gets yours?
I'm going to go with Race here. This is a tough one, but just because, as we talked about earlier, Race had a tough matchup defensively, and I thought he did as well as could be expected on Battle. And he still, he goes 4 for 7 from the field for 10 points, 5 rebounds, a couple assists. It just seems like, and we kind of alluded to it earlier, there were a couple loose ball type rebounds that I'm pretty sure that Race had a hand in keeping alive, that we were eventually able to track down, that, allowed us to keep the lead. I mean, it was a situation where I think one of those was in that run and early in the, or not early, but in that second half, we kind of started to pull away where they weren't that far down. And if they come up with an offensive rebound and a stick back, it might change the momentum a little bit. And Race was, very active in keeping the ball alive in a couple of those. So I'm going to go with Race, but it's tough. I had Xavier in my notes. I also had to be honest with you, I had Trace in my notes, but I'm going to go with Race.
All right, Kathy, what are you going to do? You going to make it easier on me? Go with the same, or are you going to go with somebody else? All right, I appreciate that.
I totally. I'm with Coach Jeff here. I wrote down about 3 different people as well, and the same 3 people. I wrote down Race. I wrote down Trace, especially Trace. I mean, he's our only player with a double-double. Although I think we've been so hard on guard play this year, especially on Xavier. I'm actually going to give my Hustle award to Xavier. Again, he helped lead that way in that first half along with Rob with his 10 points. And he came out in that second half and just played again within himself, even after he got that 3rd foul. And you could see, I could visibly see him really starting to get worked up. Coach, again, Woodson had a great coaching moment, calmed him down, and he stayed out there and had some great plays. I love that fake where he was going back out to take the ball in, and he drove it in instead for a 2-point shot and 1 attempt. He missed the free throw, but beyond that, I thought his play was great. So for me, I'm giving X my Hoosier Hustle award.
Man, you guys are making it rough. Those are the two that I had. So
You're welcome.
So at least we're all in the same wavelength there. I don't know. Maybe I'll let the fact that he was playing Minnesota influence my decision and sway me to Race. I thought he made big buckets down the stretch, really put pressure on Battle. And I think that was part of what helped them wear down a little bit over the course of the half. And I think Race showed a ton of hustle by trying to chase Battle off some of these screens and different things that he was doing. So I'll go with him, but I definitely felt like X was right there in the mix. I know Coach was talking about from being there, just how well he was playing defensively and just kind of being a pest out there. So I'll give the slight edge to Race, but I would not be mad at anybody for picking Xavier. Those were the 2 that really stood out to me. So always good to have multiple worthy contenders
right.
for the for that award for sure.
It would have been really cool to have 2 guards too with both our awards. So
that would have been, nobody would have picked that to happen too often during the beginning of the season, unless it was a loss where we just kind of throw our hands up and then try to figure out who we want to give a game ball to or a Hustle award. One guy that we didn't talk about, Coach Marlowe brought him up briefly talking about some of the inbounds plays with Parker Stewart. He was one of the other guys in double figures as well. Ends up with 12 points, 4 of 5 from the floor, 2 of 3 from 3-point range. Hit a couple free throws, missed a couple free throws late. I thought offensively was a good game for him. He was able to take shots in rhythm, benefited from some of the plays that they ran for him, got a good 3 in transition in the second half when that was one of the only good 3-pointers that you took early in the second half was one that he hit. I thought offensively was really good. I think defensively just continues to be a guy who is battling out there, but really struggles to keep guys in front of him. And picked up some fouls as a result of that, and struggled a little bit in that regard. I think there's some games where matchup wise he's going to be able to survive a little bit better on that end than others. But I think the way that Rob has stepped in when he's needed to be called upon for him has been helpful and provided some of that. But I thought overall, offensively, good to see Parker get a little more involved because he had. He had not scored very much in these last few games. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but he had not really gotten in the scoring column a whole lot lately. So, Kathy, any thoughts on Parker Stewart or any other guys that we really didn't mention a whole lot yet so far?
Yeah, nothing I want to add for Parker Stewart. One person I'd like to actually ask the 2 of you your opinion on is Miller Kopp. Again, I was expecting, maybe something different from him on what he was going to be coming into the team with, and I haven't seen, which is actually a lot of scoring and really 3-point shooting, and hasn't quite been there. I mean, I think overall for the season is a decent 3-point percentage shooting, but really not the volume and points level maybe I was expecting, and perhaps maybe my expectations are just unrealistic, but I was expecting maybe a little more from him offensively, but I don't know, maybe Coach, I'm taking your job, Andy. Coach, I'll throw it to you. And what are your thoughts?
Go ahead. Take away.
Well, I'm still a little concerned about the number of shots that Miller gets. And I'd like to see us maybe run something a little bit more for Miller rather than having him try to create for himself off the bounce. But Parker only had 5 shots today, and 2 of those came off of baseline out of bounds sets. And one, as Andy mentioned, was a transition 3. So he really only got a couple shots out of flow of the offense. And I get we want to go inside, and the point guards definitely benefited from today. And I think that was the difference you saw here. A lot of teams traditionally just kind of drop down with whoever's near. Minnesota was going to double with their point guard. And so that meant the point guard, whoever they were guarding, X or Rob in this case, really benefited, whereas other times maybe it'll be Miller or Parker. But I think the one thing, Kathy, I'll kind of maybe disagree with a little bit is I think Parker's doing exactly what Coach Woodson wants. He is taking kind of what is given to him in the game, but Miller Kappa, but Miller's taking what was there. And as I mentioned earlier, I really think Miller's kind of become the glue guy, at least in that starting group. He's willing to play. He'll play. He's not the best defender. He can be exposed defensively sometimes, but Miller seems maybe to battle a little better than Parker does. When somebody drives on him, he really makes an effort to get back in front or to keep the drive from turning the corner. And so I just think Miller's doing a little bit of everything. And I'm like you. I'd like to see him get some more shots because I think that the 3% dictates that. But I thought maybe coming in he'd be a little more volume shooter, but I like the way he's kind of become a glue guy who isn't necessarily worried whether he's getting 8, 9, 10 shots.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think, Coach, you hit on a few of the things I would have mentioned. I think the way that Penn State was guarding the post, he wasn't going to be the guy to be able to get kick out opportunities. Just keep
you really
keep
want
us
to
in
go
line.
back to Penn State.
I really do not. That's the last thing that I want to do, but it must have stunted my mind, because I was thinking of how after that game, we talked about wanting to run more sets for those guys and being able to figure out ways to get them shots. I think they've done that a bit with Parker Stewart. I don't know that they've done that a lot with Miller Kopp, but he's a guy who I thought has done really well this year, and even in the Ohio State game, at really attacking closeouts. If a guy is really running at him, I think he does a good job of shot faking, taking a dribble or two, making a floater. Did that against Ohio State, and I just thought those opportunities didn't present themselves for him today. It seemed a little bit like at the beginning of the second half, they tried to run a little bit of something for him. It didn't really work. He ends up taking a dribble to his left, I think, and shooting a 3. Took a dribble one direction and shot a 3, which is just probably not his best shot. He gets the one off that we talked about in the banner moment off the offensive rebound from Geronimo, where he's just able to step into it a little bit more. I kind of fall somewhere in the middle where I feel like I'd like to see them do more for him in order to get him those opportunities. But I also think that Minnesota defended IU in a way that some of the ways he typically gets baskets were not going to present themselves today, because I don't think they left him in the same way that they were willing to leave other guys, which does create spacing opportunities for other things. I think part of that is, they were in large part leaving guys who were the ones entering the ball into the post to Trace, which for IU typically is the point guard. I don't know if there are opportunities to put him and Trace on the same side and try to have him, enter the post, relocate, try to get some shots that way, even if you're not really running stuff for him. But I don't know. It was a little bit of a mixed bag for me with him. I think part of it was game plan related. Part of it just didn't get a lot of shots. And I think that's kind of what we've seen from him, for better or worse, is he's just not getting a ton of shots in the general flow of the offense, but there, I think will be games when they need him for sure. All right. So in terms of lingering questions, I guess, and if I missed some of these in the chat, forgive me, but I guess the lingering question for me is, could IU take what they've done the last 2 games on the road? That has been an area that they've struggled this year. I don't need to tell anybody that. I don't need to rehash any of those games, even though I keep mentioning one of them accidentally during this show. But you go into an Iowa team that we know is going to struggle defensively. We know from a tempo perspective, we'll probably play a little bit more like what IU wants to do, but also a place that IU had some success recently in going off on the road, where quite frankly, there hasn't been much of that over the course of the year. So as we look ahead to that game, Coach Marlowe, I'll throw this one to you first. How do you think they're able to translate this with a few days off, translate what they've done well at home, and is that something that they can start to take on the road?
Yeah, I think first of all, you just kind of keep going back to your defensive principles, and I'll be interested to see how they guard Murray. Murray is putting up some really big numbers. He's played well. do you, and we kind of talked about this last year with Garza. Do you just kind of let Garza get his, make him work for him, and then try to go out and don't leave, and just don't let the guys like Bohannon and the McCaffrey brothers have open looks. And I kind of realized, and I realize Murray's their best player, but to me, the McCaffreys have, some pretty high IQ, basketball IQ, and they kind of make the plays that get Murray into position. And so I'll be interested to see how we choose to defend Murray and who we put on him. But my gut tells me it's probably going to be Race. But I think you got to try and attack. We need to keep getting better ball movement, better spacing. I like the fact that today it seemed like when we threw it into TJD, we cut through. We didn't just throw it in and then stand. We passed and cut through. I'd like to see us run a little bit more, some set action to get some guys open. But I like the fact that we had more movement, which was leading to better spacing. And I hope we can continue to work on that over the next couple of days in practice.
Kathy, what about you? How does IU take the show on the road?
Yeah, for me, my lingering question that I have, and I think it plays right well into how we take this on the road, is just how we got to do something with the slow starts that we seem to have. We had a slow start again, both at the beginning of the game and the second half today. And is it a result of where I think we need to change our starters? No. Maybe we're keeping them out there just a smidge too long, perhaps, in my thinking. I want to see how we can combat that, because we can't go on the road to Iowa City here this Thursday and have another slow start like we did again today. I think I was just going on the road in that kind of environment, and really anywhere, not just Iowa, but we can't afford another slow start. And we need to come out and be really a lot more aggressive, in my opinion. And if we're not, then we need to get people in more quickly, I think, that can really provide us that spark off the bench and get us going.
Yep, I would agree with that. I think it'll be, as we think about rotations, you've had Galloway come in and provide a spark. You had Phinisee come in and provide a spark. Do you need to turn to that a little bit earlier in some of these games where you get off to slow starts or halves or whatever the case may be? As you look ahead to Iowa, just to give everybody a quick update, they managed to not have a game for a whole week leading up to the game. So lucky them, I guess. Lost at Wisconsin on Thursday and then don't play again for a week. They're 11-4, just 1-3 in the league. Although, to be fair, the losses have come at Purdue and at Wisconsin, and then home against Illinois. Their other loss came at Iowa State. So they've got a few decent wins. They did win at Jared's beloved Virginia Cavaliers earlier in the year, but they really tried their best to blow that game. I remember watching the end of it. They really did everything they could to give that one back. And then Big Ten-wise, their win came at home against Maryland. So it'd be interested to see offensively another great test for IU, or I guess it'll be a test for IU's defense. They're ranked third in adjusted offensive efficiency as I look at it right now. However, in standard Iowa fashion, they are 155th on the defensive end. So it feels like a game. Great test for IU's defense. I like you guys. I'm curious what they'll do to guard Keegan Murray. I think Race probably draws the first assignment on that. I think Geronimo is a guy who you might be able to use on him in some scenarios there. And I think you got to make him play on the defensive end as well. So some of the plays they ran to get Race the ball in the post, I think you do some of those similar things, see if you can get him in a little bit of foul trouble, and then go from there. Fran will obviously be there to provide us all with great entertainment, as is always the case. And we'll move on from there. But moment. Yeah, exactly. That is almost assured to happen. So I believe that is a 9:00 Eastern time tip on Thursday. I do not have the network, but we'll certainly let people know where that is. I would imagine it's ESPN, or I guess it could be a Big Ten network. I don't know. 9:00 Eastern. Go ahead.
Andy, somebody posted in the chat, and probably the true lingering question here is, will Mike Woodson wear a suit?
It is definitely on my 10-year-old's radar. She definitely is aware of the record with it and without it. So so she will definitely be looking.
Hey, if we can figure this out, can't one of the assistants figure out that
somebody has to step in?
They have. I heard an interview with I think it was the Hoosier Hysterics asking one of the assistants, and they know. But I don't think it's going to change.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see. All right. So that's our preview of Iowa. Before we do last call, I know you guys did a show earlier in this week after the Wisconsin game, correct? Right, on the women's side. So when is the next Doing the Work scheduled at this point?
Yeah, actually also on Thursday. So this time we have a pretty good staggered time between the women's game and the men's. So the women's have a really early start time. I think it's 6:00 Eastern, 5:00 Central, and the men don't play until 3 hours later. So Jeff and I are going to try to squeeze our post-game show in after the women's game, but before the men's tip. So if anyone's out there really wanting to have an entire, 5-6 hours of basketball, Indiana hoops, I'd encourage them to start with the women. They are on Big Ten Network this time, so they're televised on regular Big Ten, not Big Ten Plus. So you can come and join the fun then with Jeff and I afterwards before you get going on the men's side.
And we just want to thank everybody who's been watching so far, and hopefully tell some friends. If you've been watching, you're in the chat mob, tell some friends or the chat mobbers today, come and give us a view and join our chat mob on doing the work.
Yeah, and just a good plug for our women too. I mean, they're ranked now 6th in the nation, so they're putting out a fantastic product. So if you can support them in any way, that'd be awesome.
Maybe a little higher this week. There were some top teams who lost this week on the women's side. So from that, and somebody pointed out, Brian points out in the chat, that game's on Fox Sports 1 for the men on Thursday night.
Good call. All right, yes, definitely. Everybody check it out. I can't think of a better way to spend a Thursday evening than spending 6 hours of IU men's and women's basketball and postgame shows. So
sounds good to me.
I wholeheartedly endorse that approach to Thursday evening. So, all right, well, let's go and get our final thoughts. Before we do that, just a reminder to check out our friends at Home Field Apparel. Use the promo code HOME at checkout to get 15% off your first order. And with that, it is time for last call. Kathy, I will go to you first. Final thoughts on IU's 73-60 victory over Minnesota.
Minnesota, yeah, not Penn State. Yeah, again, good job. Way to go. Landed it. Yeah, I think, again, just another good performance all around from our team. Like you mentioned, Andy, it was a tale of two halves. We had the great guard play in the first half, followed up by some great going inside play in the second half with another double-digit win at home. Time to see if we can travel this time and see. We're going to 3-2 now in Big Ten play, one game at a time, and just keep moving up. And if we can get that Iowa game and steal one here on the road, that would be fantastic for us. So again, like, how do we combat those slow starts? How can we keep this balance going? How can we keep the guard play going? So there's a lot of really great momentum for the team. So I just really hope to see them come out and battle on Thursday. And especially me being an hour and a half down the road from Iowa City, I have a lot of Hawkeye friends out there, so this is pretty personal for me, I guess. So I hope to see it travel well on Thursday.
All right. As today was for Race Thompson, Thursday is for Kathy. It's personal. All right. Coach Marlowe, what do you got to finish this out with?
I'm going to go along with Kathy, and I mentioned it earlier. We need to stack some wins, and in the league, and you got to be able to go out on the road if we really want to get toward the top half of the Big Ten. I'm not saying we're going to win the league, but if we want to be in that top 4 or 5, if we can work our way in there, we got to win a couple on the road while we defend the home court. And I think that's something I get a feeling that's something Coach Woodson's really preaching as well. It's like, okay, we played well, beat Ohio State. Now we come back, played fairly well, had our moment there in the second half, but we played pretty well today against Minnesota. Let's one more game, and just kind of that old Bob Knightism. You're only as good as your last game, but you also got to be ready for the next game. And I was really excited because I was gonna try and look this up real quick. When was the last time we really ran off a string of 2, 3, 4 Big Ten wins in a row? It just seems like it's been so long. I can't recall one. And so
I looked it up at some point. Somebody asked a question, or we were talking about win streaks during Archie Miller era in Big Ten play. I looked it up. I don't remember what it was, but it wasn't a big number, and I do not recommend people to look it up.
But it's time. If we want to be back into that top echelon of the Big Ten, you got to be able to go out and win 2, 3, 4 in a row. Well, we've won 2. Now let's make it 3.
Yeah, I'm right along the same lines as you guys. I think these 2 home games this week were of great importance, not just from the Big Ten play, but from a confidence standpoint, coming off of that Penn State loss. And I think saw a couple double-digit victories. They both had some low points in them, but I thought overall it was a great opportunity to get a number of guys' confidence. You got key contributions off the bench, and those are the kinds of things that are going to provide a spark, because somebody's going to invariably get in foul trouble when you're on the road. Somebody's not shooting well. Who can step up and play well? And I thought you saw big-time bench performances from Trey Galloway and Rob Phinisee over the course of these 2 games this week. And then, as you guys said, now if you can take that confidence and get a win at Iowa, then you've got at Nebraska. Could you find a way over the next week, I guess week and a day, that Nebraska game is on Martin Luther King Day on the 17th. Can you get these couple road wins? And even though you didn't get, a Penn State win that you felt like you should and missed an opportunity at Wisconsin, still getting to a couple road wins and continuing to protect home court is a good recipe. So I definitely think that, these couple road games are really important. And I think hopefully it's something no different than the shooting of some of the things for the guys on this team. Like you get one and it snowballs a little bit. You get one to get yourself over the hump and remind yourself that you can win some of these road games and walk into some of these places and play well. And hopefully it snowballs from there, because the home game coming up after those two is a big one with Purdue. So we got a long way till we get to that game, but glad IU could come back and do what it needed to do, take care of home court, get a big win against Ohio State. And now we take the show on the road and hope that it can travel. So that will do it for us here on the Assembly Call IU postgame show. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel over at youtube.com/assemblycall. And don't forget to go to join.assemblycall.com to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for the music you hear on the show. And special thanks to John Ringer of Rig Design for designing our logo. And thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU hoops again after the Iowa game on Thursday night. And until then,
take it from me, Christian Wofford. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
I like everything about that.
All right. Thank you, guys. Good show.
Yeah, thanks for having
us. Good
us.
win. And hopefully
Right?
Yeah, I got one in a little bit. So we did not. We're a little shorthanded due to some health issues of our own, and did not play well yesterday. So we'll see. We'll see if today brings bigger and better things. Hopefully, it will.
Good luck today.
We'd been on a good win streak. Yesterday was not our day. Kind of similar to when on 2 possessions in a row, a girl just banks in an 18-footer from the wing when they're clearly not trying to bank it. Yep. When that happens twice in a row, you just kind of know, like, maybe this is not going to be our day. And we didn't do ourselves any favors, but it was most certainly not our day at that point. So we'll see. Today's a new day. Good thing about them is that we play back-to-back days. So if you play bad on Saturday, you can come back and get a chance to get a better taste in your mouth on Sunday. So hopefully we will. So.
All right. Well, hopefully you finish your weekend then with the win. So
let's hope so. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining. Thanks, Chat Mob. Good victory. And then we'll talk to everybody again late night on Thursday.
Sounds good.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye.